my name is Dan. This is a 2012 Cirrus SR22. It's a Gen 3.
Recently, we checked out the Cirrus SR22, a G3 model. Cirrus is well known to be the premium brand when it comes to piston engine aircraft. Some of the cool features in the SR22 includes air conditioning and a parachute. And for this particular model, you even have a third seat for 3 people in the back. Today we meet the owner of this beautiful 2012 Cirrus SR22.
I started flying in 2012, so about 8 years ago. It's something I always wanted to do as a kid. My wife was tired of hearing about it, so she said to me finally, why don't you just go do it? And I did. I learned to fly in Cessna 172s, Pipers, Piper Warriors, Piper Archers. After I got my private, I bought a Grumman Tiger with a couple of partners, and Mike actually reviewed that plane and interviewed one of my partners who's one of the owners in that plane. And I probably put 200 hours in that plane, just flying. I got my instrument rating in that plane, and it was a great plane. You know, it was for what it was fast. It was inexpensive to operate, especially in a partnership. It was a very good, capable cross-country plane. It was good for learning, you know, IFR and getting my instrument rating. Got to the point where for work and for family, for just traveling, it was a little small, it was a little bit slow, and it wasn't the most comfortable for a long trip. We wanted something faster. We looked at a lot of planes. We looked at Bonanzas, we looked at Saratogas, looked at Cherokee 6s, and you know, I don't have a need for 6 seats. I didn't really want the ongoing cost of managing retractable gear. Like the technology of the Cirrus, like the speed, it was fun to fly, and so ultimately we decided that for business and for family and just enjoyment purposes, the SR22 was the right plane for us. So bought this about 3-4 months ago. I've put about 50 hours or so on it so far, and so far we're loving it. So, you know, the mission for this plane, and one of the reasons why we really started looking, you know, outside of or to upgrade from the Grumman, primarily, you know, business day trips in the southeast area, and then, you know, family trips down, mostly to South Florida, but to sort of the popular destinations around around the Atlanta area, Hilton Head, Charleston, you know, going down to the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area, you know, and you know, what could be a 5.5–6 hour trip in the Grumman is about a 3.5–4 hour trip in this plane. Has more fuel capacity, so we can fly without stopping. And so for us, you know, the mission was twofold. It was on a business side, you know, being able to go and come back in the same day, having, you know, more advanced avionics to be able to go, you know, handle IFR conditions, so that we don't get stuck places, and just making longer trips more comfortable for the family, and just, you know, more capable. Didn't really consider the SR20. I think for the comparison, the Grumman was a much less expensive alternative with, I mean, it's not the same, but with relatively similar performance. You know, really going up to the high performance airplanes. I think what, you know, it just, I flew a few different planes, and I don't know, I just like the Cirrus. My wife liked the Cirrus, which probably had a factor in that. We didn't have a need for 6 seats. So once we narrowed it down to Cirrus, you know, the question then becomes the different generations, right? Gen 1, Gen 2 can be purchased for less than Gen 3 and up, obviously, because they're older. The earlier generations use the Avidyne avionics suite, which is a good, I mean, it's a very good suite of avionics. But for the purposes of what I was interested in, I decided that the G1000, or Cirrus calls it Garmin Perspective, which is essentially the same thing, was the right avionics suite for me. And so then it, you know, became a question of which generation. This Gen 3 it's a 2012, so it's the first year that they have the 5th seat in the back, if you can call it that. It has a 60/40 fold down for cargo purposes, just like you would have in a car. It does have the 5th seat. The 5th seat is for a kid. who's small, but it's just nice to have that option. We fit a car seat back there for my daughter perfectly. I mean, you can fit another adult back there, and that's comfortable. Five would definitely be a squeeze. This is a normally aspirated version of the SR22, so it has an IO 550N engine from Continental. We didn't have a need for turbocharged here. Being in Atlanta, there's not a lot of terrain that we need to worry about or get over. I'm perfectly happy flying at 10, 12,000 feet, you know, and not really going higher than that. It does not have built-in oxygen. Most of the turbocharged versions and turbo normalized versions do. We'll typically cruise, I'll operate at lean of peak. So we will climb out at about 28, 29 gallons per hour. Once in cruise, we will operate at about 50 degrees lean of peak. It'll burn about 13 to 13 and a half gallons per hour, sometimes a little bit less depending on the temperatures and your altitude. And we'll do about 165 knots true. I could probably get about another 5 to 10 knots out of the plane by running at rich of peak, but I'd be burning somewhere around 18 gallons per hour. So for me, you know, adding 10, 15, 20 minutes of flight time, but burning a lot less fuel is a trade-off that I'm willing to take. There's a lot of debate in the Cirrus world and probably in the Continental IO 550 world about running lean versus rich of peak, and you know, I've found, like most Cirrus owners, that the lean of peak seems to be where it's happy. So this plane is FICI certified. When we were looking at when we narrowed it down to a few planes, we were debating between going FICI or not. Decided ultimately it's better to have it than not have it, even though we probably won't need it that much down here in the south. So FICI certified, it's certified for flight into known icing conditions, provided that the pilot within the last 24 months completes the Cirrus flight into known icing course, which they have available online, which is an interesting tidbit that I did not know previously. So it's FICI certified. It uses TKS fluid, which is sort of like an alcohol-based fluid. It's got panels on the leading edges of the wings, in the tail, on the horizontal stabilizer, the vertical stabilizer. It also has de-ice on the prop and on the windshield. You know, my rule with flight into icing is use the FICI to get through it, not to fly into it or you know, stay in it. But you know, it does give you adequate time to get through layers, or you know, get above it or below it while you're flying.
Today's video is brought to you by CoFlight. CoFlight is perhaps the most important tool that you need for your aircraft maintenance. Think of it as a one-stop shop to schedule your maintenance, coordinate with your AP mechanic, and keep proper records of everything. CoFlight also has some cool features like keeping digital records of your logbook and a built-in scheduler for multiple partners who may share the same aircraft. The best part about CoFlight is that everything is done by the tip of your fingers. You can get started using CoFlight today absolutely free. When you use the coupon code MojoGrip, you can get started today for 30 days absolutely free. Check out coflight.com or use the link in the description below.
The used market for Cirrus is pretty big. I mean, obviously Cirrus has been producing a lot of aircraft, so there are a lot for sale. Most of the you know, examples that I was interested in were represented by brokers. There's two large brokers that probably account for the majority of the used Cirrus market. So this one was the seller was using a broker. It was based up in Raleigh. Made an offer, we negotiated a bit and landed on a price, and the process from there was pretty simple. I had it flown here to Atlanta, to McCollum, for a pre-buy inspection. A couple small things came up on the pre-buy, settled those up with the seller, and then at that point you wire the money to escrow, and they transfer the title and you get the keys and you get in and leave. Training is different per insurance company. I know that some insurance companies, when it comes to Cirrus, want you to go through a Cirrus specific transition course using what they call a CSIP, which is, I think it's a Cirrus standardized instructor pilot, or you can look it up, but they want you to use a CSIP. Other insurance companies have different regulations or requirements. Cirrus offers a program called Embark, which is available to used Cirrus owners or people who just purchased used Cirruses, where Cirrus will actually pay for your transition training with a CSIP. Unfortunately, I purchased this plane during COVID when the Embark program was suspended. But on the flip side, my insurance company did not require me to go through the official transition training. Their requirement was I just needed a sign-off from a instructor who met the hours required in the open pilot policy on my insurance plan. So I probably did about 3 or 4, maybe 5 hours of flying, some instrument flying, emergency procedures, getting familiar with the G1000 or Grumman Perspective suite of avionics. Got a sign off and started flying. 2 features that people like about this particular Cirrus is the air conditioning and of course the parachute. The air conditioning is something that I didn't realize how great it was until we had it. It works surprisingly well. It's very efficient. It keeps the plane very cool on the ground. Once you're in the air, you get some altitude, it cools off regardless. But it's a lifesaver for ground operations in the summer in Atlanta, where it can be 90, 95, 100 degrees, and as soon as the engine's running, it works very well. The parachute, of course, I think probably what makes people most familiar with Cirrus. It's a nice piece of safety equipment to have for sure. I think there are probably some pilots who fall into the trap of stretching their personal limits because they know that they have a backup, which is not the right attitude to have towards it. But it's a good safety device. It's not the reason that we bought the plane, but it's certainly an added benefit, particularly when you're flying, with your family. And when used properly, it does its job. And I know that Cirrus has, invested a lot of time and money in, training pilots to use the parachute and when to use it and how to use it, because, initially, the accident rate in Cirrus wasn't great. And a lot of it was, a high performance, capable aircraft, faster aircraft, a slick airframe, but pilots, for whatever reason, they've been trained, without a parachute previously, were afraid to use it. And, since Cirrus invested time and money in really educating pilots on the parachute usage, obviously the numbers speak for themselves, and it's a valuable, resource to have on board.